Hello there. Welcome to another episode. This is the SoapyRao show, in case you're wondering. But be ready to have your minds blown. Not your minds. I know there's war going on in the world, but your minds blown. Because I've been thinking about this. But anyway, hey, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Hope you're well, blah, 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 blah. Hope your mental health is good. Hope your balls are not tangled. Whatever is going on in your life, I hope it's all straightened out. And if you don't like things straight, then I hope they're curvy. Everything goes, and whatever. I always say, I was taught, was not taught it, but I thought the saying was, whatever rocks your boat, but apparently it's whatever floats your boat. Because in America, it's whatever floats your boat. But I don't know, I thought it's rocks your boat, but clearly I think floats your boat makes sense, because why would you want your boat to rock? Unless, of course, you like rocky boats. But everything's flipped in America, man, because when I thought I got my English right in University of Wales in Swansea, I go to America and they're like, oh no, it's wrong. Yeah, fanny means different things. Strange. But clearly, whatever floats your boat, I'm sticking with that, because the world is going the American way. Or it has gone. Maybe the tide is changing, or maybe there is a drift in the climate. There's change in the air. Can you smell it? Anyhow, I've been thinking about this whole concept of money. Now, I'm not obsessing over money. If it does seem that way, maybe I am. Point out my flaws. But the reason why I'm thinking about money is because we have this notion that we have to work to get money. And I suppose that's true. But let's look at this in 2 different or 3 different ways. Yeah? I've broken this down. I've spent some time. 3 minutes on the pot this morning, and the thought and the concept is very clear in my head right now. We are told that we have to work, and we get paid, and we use that money to live. Got it? Pretty clear till now. So that money is giving us a chance to buy goods and services, which will supposedly enhance our lives. Of course, better quality of life, better food, better shelter, better clothing, better booze, better prostitutes, whatever you need. Or a better partner, depending on how you want to present yourself, education, all these things, a better status in society. But then there's the next stage where we think the more you work, the more money you make, which I suppose is also true. So the reward system. The more you bend over and take it from the senior management, the more they reward you with stock options, the more they reward you with bonus, the more they reward you with a higher package or a packet. And then you get more and you spend more and you spend. But what I'm trying to get past is this notion that money is only possible, or to make more money, you have to work more, or the only way you can make more is by working. I think that needs to be isolated, because, see, of course, there is now the reward or the remuneration through work is money, whether it's stocks, whether it's Bitcoin, whatever it comes to, currency which you can spend or save or put up your bum, whatever you choose to do with that. But I think it's stupid, right? Because it was much clearer in my head. See, the thing is, if your entire focus in life is to make money, you don't have to work. You get what I mean? You kind of told that, because I speak to a couple of people, not on this podcast alone, but just some people are like, oh, I need to work another 5 years so I can save up enough, or I need to do this much so I have a certain piggy bank or a certain pot which I can live off for the rest of my life. Now, I know people who work their entire life, 50 years, 60 years, and they just have not much, because you're also designed, the system is designed for you to spend that money. The system is designed for you to spend more as you make more, with this kind of material escalator with better clothes, better cars, better jewelry, better watches, better homes, better amenities, better memberships, whatever there is to spend, there is something to spend on. Or wherever there's an opportunity to spend, there is a service or a thing that you will be told that you need as you go up the ladder. Now, there are people who make, and of course, yeah, the thing is, if your sole focus, of course, is to make money, and I mean, not to spend it, but your goal is to just make money, I don't think you need to work in a conventional job. I don't think you need to have a 9 to 5. You don't have to have a career, but you can entirely develop your life skills and your whatever it is, the things you pick up along the way, and hone those skills, and you can entirely focus on becoming a money-making machine. I don't know what the opportunities are and the avenues are, because I wouldn't be. Maybe I would be doing this, but I think we've all been told that you have to work, you get a job, you get money. Bullshit. You don't need that approach. That's there. Many of us, most of us, do that. And then you wake up going, oh, wait a second, I spent 50 years or whatever, 30 years working for this company. They've given me stocks, they give me everything. But the illusion is, because whatever it may be, like even celebrities might seem like they have $100 million, $200 million, but they hoard themselves out a lot. And that at the end of the day, doesn't seem like a lot of money for hoarding yourself out that much. I mean, of course, the hoarding gets less and more depending on where you are or in which context you are. Celebrities hoard themselves and it's more money, but some people hoard themselves and it's less money. And basically, we are all just whores, is what I think this podcast title should be. But I can't call it that because I have a guest on the other side of this. And I don't want him to think that that's the title of where he's featured. No, he's got a lot to tell you about. But anyway, I'll get to that. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to fall for this trap of the more you work, the more money you get, the more you're rewarded, the more you commit to a company, or the more. Of course, not everyone has it in them. I don't know how to make money. In fact, I know how to spend money, but I don't know how to make it as well. So I'm just here giving you my breakdown of what this concept is. But there are some people who are very, very single-mindedly good at doing things. Now, whether it's cleaning a house, whether it's social work. So I was saying, if you have that kind of single-minded need to make money, and that's your sole focus, don't work. Just learn how to make money really well. And I'm sure this has probably been said by someone else, more experienced and more good at making money, and they probably write a book and make money off that. But I'm giving it for free. See, I'm not putting it behind a paywall. I'm terrible at making money. I'm giving you the free podcast week in, week out, and I don't know how to get a Patreon page. I don't know how to put a paywall. YouTube won't allow me to get a subscriber thing because I don't have enough fans on the page. It's ridiculous, but it doesn't affect me. At least when I'm saying this now. It affects me later. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. But what I'm trying to get at is don't have to get into that trap. Now, some people are good at it. Some people need the job. But if you're willing to take that leap of faith and just focus all your skills, all your time in your formative academic or whatever the time that you spend education to get a job, what if you focus that only on making money? Do it and let me know how that pans out, because clearly I'm not going to do it. But let me know what you think of the idea, because I think there is something there. Maybe I've not thought it through, but there is something there. And if I've given you a spark of an idea, or given you hope, or given you do act on it. If it falls flat on its face, hey, fuck it, right? You tried. Don't come back and bitch to me going, oh, you put up this. As I told you, everything on this podcast is free. You can take it with a pinch of salt. If you have high blood pressure, don't take the salt, but take it with a pinch on your ass, whatever you choose to do. But let's move on, because my guest on today's episode is Mr. Albert Nerenberg. He's a fantastic human being from Canada. And of course, when I say fantastic human being, I don't mean it loosely. We, in fact, just introduced each other to each other, or introduced ourselves to each other on the call. We didn't have prior, prep. He's a fantastic guy. He's got a lot of documentaries out. He's a filmmaker. He's a hypnotist. But we didn't talk too much about the hypnotism part because, man, we just got caught up in the conversation about the various interests, his documentaries, which he's made on these interests. And it's just so strange that we've never met. We're in different parts of the world, but we connected on so many levels. And I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. It's a great conversation with a really interesting human being and a fun guy and a Canadian. Hey, yeah. So without further ado, do listen to the conversation with Mr. Albert Nerenberg, only here on the SoapyRao show, coming up on the other side. Do share it with friends, with your family, with your pets, with your loved ones. And if your family, friends and pets happen to be your loved ones, nothing like it. If they're not, then find a category of loved ones. And of course, you can thank me later about the tip about making money. Hey, what do you say? Thank you. Enjoy the episode. Goodbye. God bless. Take care of yourselves. Till next time. Cheers. Mr. Albert Nerenberg, welcome to the SoapyRao show. How are you this, well, morning for me and evening for you, sir?
I'm pretty good. I'm enjoying. I make a joke, but I'm enjoying our coronavirus sixth wave here. But
Oh,
um,
wow. Okay.
we're in our sixth wave. But no. But I'm kidding. It's not probably not a lot of laughs.
Yeah.
But I'm good. Spring is coming in Canada, which is a big relief. I think we're happy about it.
Lovely. No, you know what the strange thing is? There's, as you mentioned, with coronaviruses and the waves of the pandemic, we have a chain of coffee shops in Bangalore where I live, just like Starbucks, called Third Wave Coffee. And last May, I was just like, man, these guys really didn't
That was an
anticipate.
awkward name. That is funny.
Yeah, it's unintended, I'm sure, but they really got I don't know if they got a boost in sales, but the
Yeah,
wave really was like, where you got? So
yeah.
I think sometimes, destiny plays out in different shapes and forms. But so you're sitting right now in Toronto, am I right?
I'm actually near Toronto, not
Okay.
actually in Toronto. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting because you guys had all the attention on your capital when it came to the lorry or the truck strikes and the barricades and the entire blockade. But I think now everything's sort of dismantled, and is life back to so-called normal, or how
Yeah, it's a
things?
tough one. This is I just think it's probably a rabbit hole that we could go down for a while. But I find myself a little bit. I think we've all found the pandemic to be intensely suffocating,
Yeah,
and I find, like, on an intellectual level, intellectual. I mean, there are a bunch of issues that weren't even ever debated. Or I'll give you an example. Right now, people are sort of saying. The virus has become far less dangerous, and it's on its way out. The sort of implicit explanation is that it has to do with vaccines. But I travel, and I was in places like Nepal where I don't know, 25% of people are vaccinated, and the virus is doing the same thing. So vaccines aren't really a factor in what's happening to the virus, I think. But you're not allowed to say that.
no,
There's like
and
an
look,
official
yeah, even like
official
people like
narrative.
Joe Rogan, everyone's sort of under fire for saying things which are proving more and more real, right? Like, of course, vaccine. I
Yeah,
mean, we're not saying that vaccines are bad. I think all of us have been vaccinated against something or
yeah,
the other, and we're
yeah.
here because of that. But this particular vaccine, I mean, that's the thing, right? The narrative is changing from, oh, you're never going to get COVID after you get this vaccine, to you'll get milder symptoms. So, what is the reality? What is the truth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and also just that if the virus is sort of getting milder, maybe it was going to do it anyways.
And that's
Uh,
exactly something I spoke to a virologist who was heading one of the departments at this university in Delhi, and he said as the virus doesn't want to kill the host, it wants to live in the host. So it's trying to figure out as well what's the best sort of symbiotic setup, what's the best roommate situation I can develop before this host just keeps abandoning me.
I
So I think
like
that's
that.
what it's doing. It's trying to live with you, and you're just being a difficult roommate. So maybe these, you know,
COVID wants to be your roommate. That's
no one wants
right.
to be the roommate. But I think that's the thing. I got at home, my wife, my mom, and I got a bad bout of COVID last May, and we had pretty strong antibodies because we got the second variant, right? And that was pretty potent. Like, we had fatigue, we had body pain, we had 10, 12 days of, like, the smell went, and then my mom had stomach cramps. But fortunately, the oxygen levels didn't drop. But after that, I was like, am I going to take something that my body, I'm not going to trust what my body's developed to fight and defend me, or am I going to take something which is a foreign body injected? Anyway, I kind of succumbed to peer pressure and took it, because my wife's like, we're not going to get a chance to travel if we don't take this vaccine. And I was like, okay, we'll take the vaccine so we can travel. And the next thing, she's pregnant and we can't travel anyway, because she's she's not allowed to travel after a few months. So I'm like, oh, great.
But see, you raise an interesting question, is that a lot of people assumed that natural immunity is a factor. And early on in the pandemic, there was a whole bunch of, kind of like fast pedaled research saying natural immunity is very weak and doesn't work at all in the case of COVID, even though in other diseases it does.
Yeah.
And then that position was reversed. And
Mm.
so, anyways, this is why people have questions. But I have
Yeah.
a feeling like we're not. You know, a bunch of us right now, we call COVID the thing that should not be mentioned
Yeah,
because
the
it's
one who must not be named.
dreary.
Yeah.
It should not be. It's such a dreary topic,
Yeah.
you know. Except
No,
that
but
it's
it leads into this place because it sort of brings out this versatile portfolio of things that you do in your life, which is you essentially ask questions, right? Whether it's in the role of a filmmaker where you're kind of pondering things like laughter and humor, and I want to talk about all of these things and not sort of. I find it fascinating. To even your newest project, which you just mentioned, which is about natural eye healing. You kind of the curiosity drives, and I love being curious as well. To being a hypnotist, and I think you do a range of other things as well. So, in a time where you're being told what to do and how to think and how not to be and how you're going to be exposed to a certain thing and follow a bunch of rules, and I'm not saying they're all bad or good, I'm not passing judgment because, of course, today's day and age, you have to be an expert before you say anything. But what was, how have you come out of this past 2 years and looking at the world around you and sort of what kind of questions are you asking yourself at this time?
That's a really good question. I mean, I have played a weird part in this. I don't think it's that well known, but I should explain that. I am pro science. My father was a physicist, a somewhat well known physicist. So I am science oriented. But from the very beginning, I felt there was manipulation, there was intimidation. One of the biggest examples was at the beginning of the pandemic, they told everyone to stay the fuck inside.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was an example of, I could understand in a big crowded city why that was imperative, but not everybody lives in big cities, and not everyone needs to stay the fuck inside. And it also, staying the fuck inside is also one of the most unhealthy things you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was shocked. In fact, this documentary I'm working on, I'm finishing now, called Cold Fever, is actually about a group of people who go outside. It's like the power of outsideness.
Especially where you live. I mean, I've had a few years in the Northwest in America, like just outside Portland, Oregon. I mean, of course, I'm not talking about Portland in context of the pandemic and what happened with the elections, etc. But generally, the outdoors in North America is beautiful. Like it's vast. Like I don't have that kind of space in Bangalore or in Bombay. Someone living has,
That's right.
or in LA or San Francisco, wherever, New York. But if when you're living in like suburban America, or even a little beyond suburban America, you've got at least an acre around you. I think staying out is a good thing.
That's exactly it. I mean, part of the film is an interesting twist, is that a group of us decided, rather than stay the fuck inside, we went outside when the pandemic hit. And, the idea was that outside was safe, that if you keep a reasonable distance, you're not going to infect people if you're outdoors. But the problem was, in Canada, there's a pretty vicious winter that comes. And so a bunch of us started cold swimming. So I became a cold swimmer the last 2 years, where that's where you actually go into a freezing lake. People think it's hypnosis. It's interesting. I do a lot of things that are hypnosis, but swimming in a lake that's at 0 degrees is not hypnosis. It's actually something else. I mean, it has, maybe there's some principles that it borrows from hypnosis, but
yeah, because I read about that. Yeah, sorry, just on that point, because it's something which is cropped up. I'm losing the ability to speak as well.
Yeah.
Over the past, like I've been reading this book by David Sinclair called Lifespan, and in that he talks about certain things besides diet and exercise, which are good for longevity. And one of these things is cold plunges. And right. I read about, even in another context, where you look at people who go through an initiation process when they're pursuing this path of spirituality, yogis or Tibetan monks, who basically live in the mountains when they're going through their, I don't know if it's initiation or if it's the process of apprenticeship. And one of the things they have to do is do a swim in an icy lake, and then they have to sort of warm up themselves, and the towel has to dry off just through their body heat, which they do through breathing practices. So it's very interesting you mentioned that, and I'd like to
well, in fact, that's exactly the story I was chasing. I went to Nepal in December to find it. Actually, that whole, in a sense, that tradition originates, or I mean, it probably originates in a lot of places, but it originates in Nepal, in a particular cave. It's quite a weird story. That there is a particular monk who sort of figured out the style of breathing called inner fire. or translates as inner fire.
Mm-hmm.
And Wim Hof, who's this crazy Dutch guy, learned this style of breathing, and then
Yes.
has now
Okay.
become like, he has a show on the BBC now where the whole idea is like he's throwing people in icy lakes. But I
Yeah.
think, but where you and I agree, like, because let me try to tell you what I think I do, because I want to sort of frame this correctly. The best way, like somebody said to me the other day, they said, you're a master of the obvious. And what I think I do differently than other people is I'm able to make things really simple and clear, like obvious in a way. So with a cold, what I think, I discovered in working on this film is that we have an irrational fear of the cold. The cold is actually good for us in small doses. It's not good to get frostbite or freeze yourself, but in small doses, the cold is actually empowering. And particularly if you live in a northern climate, it changes your view of your world, because places that you would just avoid because they're so cold, you now suddenly see the beauty of. So there's like a really amazing factor. So what I specialize in is these very simple ideas. So this film I'm making now is called Cold Fever. And the sort of slogan is "Some like it cold." It's a play on "Some like it hot." And then with hypnosis is a similar thing. I think that people always get confused because they think, how can this guy be a filmmaker and a hypnotist? Or, the mystique kind of confuses people. But I literally, when I do hypnosis, I'm literally trying to explain a very obvious point. So one of the TEDx's that I did has to do with finger snapping. And my claim is that one of the reasons that hypnosis is misunderstood is that people see it as a kind of authoritarian tradition where people order you into trance or intimidate you into trance. But it's actually more interesting than that. It's actually what's called a shock induction, where if you surprise somebody, like with a finger snap, you can, the next suggestion sometimes can go much deeper. And this also has implications for propaganda. If you scare people or bomb people or frighten people with an idea, they're often more open to suggestion. And you had asked originally how this played a part in the broader pandemic. I was actually recently flown down to Miami Beach, where there's a really interesting conference called Hereticon. It was like heretical thoughts is the whole idea of the conference. And the guy who was there, as a big deal, was Robert Malone. So Robert Malone is a pretty famous, or suddenly like blew up with his claim that people were hypnotized around the pandemic. And but Robert Malone is not a hypnotist. He's just he's actually claims to be instrumental in the development of mRNA vaccines. He's a scientist. So
is he the guy who got on the Joe Rogan podcast and got into trouble? Okay. That's what the name sounds.
That's a huge thing. Right. And literally the next week, I was in Miami Beach, and I did a show. Unfortunately, the show, they just didn't record this conference. Didn't record what it did, but I did a show where I demonstrated that you could indeed hypnotize people to believe just about anything. But it's like there's a lot of interesting questions. I demonstrated how mass hypnosis might work. I personally don't think. I think that mass hypnosis is going on, but I don't think there's only one party doing it, And anyways, at this event, I spent time with Robert Malone. I talked to him. I'm not sure I agree with him, because his point is that that's a giant sort of pharmaceutical scam, the whole thing. But, I don't think that's exactly true. I think when you if you're a true truth seeker, you find out the truth is often a little complicated, more complicated than you want it to be, It's
layered, and it has, I don't think they're all just bad actors and good actors. I think there are good people in bad situations who have to make tough decisions, which aren't always with the best outcome, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
What's fascinating is, I don't know, maybe the experience of swimming, because, I have this fear of water. I don't know where it came from, but I've always, as a kid, been in swimming pools, I've been taken to the ocean, I've gone for a thing. But, I think there's obviously that Jaws idea, but I don't know what it is that triggers this thing, because I've been thinking about it, and more as an adult, in my adult life, there's this fear of not being able to breathe, and breathing is such a important technique that you can develop while swimming or in the water, because it's a different kind of stress you put onto your body. And when you do it, especially in sub-zero temperatures or whatever, in zero temperatures, it's better for your body. So I'm just like, I've been practicing a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of, but I've been very intrigued by breath work and the various
I do
kinds of
breath work.
Oh, lovely.
I'm like
Okay.
I teach breath work. I've become recently obsessed with breath work, mainly because I think breath work can do some really crazy things. I mean,
Yeah,
the whole. I
if
don't
you
know if
read the book by James Nestor called Breathe,
of course.
he talks
Yeah.
about that, right? And I was very fascinated about that, because I do, I mean, as I said, I don't teach, I just practice a little bit, because you have the pranayama practice, you have the Sudarshan
Right.
Kriya, you have various South
A lot of this stuff
Asian.
comes from India. That's
Yeah.
the interesting thing. It does. Yeah.
So it's amazing how I mean, the natural progression would be get your breathing when you're in the water better, because it strengthens your lungs and you're able to do more. But I'm just not able to get past that hurdle. So, I mean, now as a person who teaches breath work, and as a person who also has this element and this idea into hypnosis, what do you feel like when you're in that lake or in that river or the stream at 0 degrees or sub-zero temperatures? And maybe can you talk about how maybe as an entry point into this idea of hypnosis?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of it. It's just that I actually the best way I could explain it is I did a series of sort of escalations,
Hmm.
partly to understand, because I don't want to pretend that I don't have a fear of the cold. I mean,
Hmm.
the cold is terrifying. Getting frostbite or freezing, I think, or just getting a chill is not pleasant, and freezing water is extremely painful. In
Hmm.
fact, it's so predictably painful that when scientists do pain studies, they often use ice water, because ice water is such a good predictor of pain.
Hmm.
People all basically experience it the same way at the same level of pain. So ice water is extremely painful. But I'll give you an example. In the film, one of the things that blew my mind in Cold Fever was, when you first jump into a freezing lake, and I would say the temperature is around 2 or 3 degrees, just above freezing. There's snow; it's snowing outside. That it is alarming. You start breathing, like panting in a sense, with involuntarily, because it's powerful. But then the pain actually goes away in about 30 seconds, and you actually start to feel pretty fantastic. So what actually happens is you adapt to it, and
Hmm.
the principle of adapting to something like that is mind blowing. I would explain it simply. We evolved all over this planet. At some point, animals or mammals were experienced ice ages or cold, and we all have like a deep ability to adapt to cold. Even one thing I find interesting is that there's often a cultural difference. I have some friends who are Latin American,
Hmm.
and they're like mortified, because they're like Latin America is generally a hot continent,
Yeah.
and they just think that genetically they aren't exposed to cold, but it's not true.
Hmm.
Even somebody who grew up in a warm climate can learn these techniques. And to
Yeah.
give you and what I think it says is our power. I mean, this is Wim Hof too. Our ability to adapt to certain phenomena that we think is impossible, like swimming under the ice in a cold lake, is possible. And
Oof.
not just that empowering. I did. So what I mentioned, I escalated. So first, what's interesting about the winter is that it started off, a little bit like cool weather. And then in
Hmm.
Canada, we have, November, which is, cold, but then we have December, which is very cold. And
Yeah.
January is when the lake freezes.
Right.
And it's funny what you said about fears. I have a bit of a phobia about going through the ice. I think everybody does, because we've all seen those Hollywood movies where
Yeah.
somebody's
Yeah.
like walking on the ice and they fall through the ice,
Yeah.
and either they end up like under the ice and they can't get out,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
or they just simply can't get themselves out of the water because
You
they're in
can't
shock.
grip yourself, or you have no strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as an experiment, I can send you the video. As an experiment, I just did um, an experiment where there was a hole in the ice, and I was even wearing a suit just to demonstrate it. I wanted to see if I could do it fully clothed,
Oh,
and I just
okay.
walked, and I just
Like
fell
a
through the
suit, not a wetsuit.
yeah, a suit, just clothes, yeah.
Okay.
And I fell through the ice, and went right through. And although I would describe it as shocking, and I wouldn't say it was a barrel of laughs,
Yeah.
but it actually was a barrel of laughs. I mean, what I'm saying is at the end I was laughing, but also what I found out was that it's very doable. And why not even practice it? Well, if you lived in Canada, you might want to practice going through the ice so that you're just not irrationally afraid of it.
So the thing is, do you laugh because your body wants to warm up, and that the act of laughing does it? And so you said you kind of become the pain goes away, the initial shock goes away. So but isn't that like they some people have said when you have what's it called, hypothermia setting in, you start becoming, the body withdraws blood from the extremities and it sort of just protects the organs. So isn't that a bad thing, because you start getting numb and your sensations go, and you might think it's euphoria or whatever, lack of pain, but isn't pain a good indicator of survival?
What I think it is that that's like a good counterpoint to what I'm saying, but I think that it's not. I think that what it really is that you can adapt to it. You have the ability to swim in a very cold lake for 10, 20 minutes. It's not for 3 hours, but and there's people who break records. They swim under ice, and I think the record these days is either, is it 3 minutes or 2 minutes, somewhere around 2 or 3 minutes on one breath. So
wow. Okay.
the point is, people can do that.
That's like the free divers, right? They do depth diving with one breath.
I think it's debatable, but what I really think is it points to adaptability, that you can. This is something that your body can handle, and it's universal. That's what's interesting.
No, it's amazing. I find it remarkable. Do you think heat has the same effect in the other extreme?
Well, it's interesting that there's sort of research on like the cold baths versus hot baths.
Yeah.
And I think hot baths are very pleasant.
Yeah.
But cold baths are very healthy, and they're quite a bit healthier. So and what's interesting is that, it's really funny. This is more of an American phenomenon. I think people have been so spoiled in a sense by consumer culture that they expect, like, people often, Americans travel, or Canadians too, travel to Mexico in the winters, and in midwinter, the Mexican waters in Mexico often, I don't know, maybe 22, 23 degrees centigrade, which is pretty warm, or 25 degrees.
Yeah.
But they will complain that it's too cold for them. And that's because people have been acculturated to believe that the world is their bathtub, that they like bathtub temperatures. And the best thing that cold swimming does for you is you recognize that actually fresh, cool water, I'm not talking about extremely cold, just even, 10 degrees or 14 degrees, something like that, is actually extremely pleasant and refreshing. And
no, I can vouch for that. I remember that growing up, my cousin used to take me to work out, because he's like, your frame's really narrow, whatever. So I remember in December, Bangalore doesn't get cold by North American standards, right? We hit about 11 degrees in the peak of winter, like in the night at 3 a.m. or maybe 9 degrees if it's a relatively colder winter. But like, we used to go at 5 in the morning, and he used to just say, rinse off under the shower, and we're jumping in, and whoa, that was cold. Like, and not sub-zero or freezing point, but you'd feel great after, though.
That's right. I save money on coffee because I take cold showers every morning, and I mean, I really do. I'm not joking. It's like I drink much less coffee now because I'm much more alert.
Actually, you know what? I don't even know why I do coffee, because it's sort of a habitual drink for me in the morning, because I stop milk, I stop sugar with my coffee, and now I'm having a cup of coffee as we speak, and I'm just like, I feel good anyway, because unless, of course, you really need a kickstarter for the day. I think what you said is right, because I try making it a point, like my initial sort of plunge into the shower needs to be a little warm, but then I just sort of turn the tap back on to fully cold. Plus, we're dealing with a pretty hot summer here in Bangalore right now. So I think it's a really cool thing that we avoid. I mean, this thing that we aspire for, hot showers. I think especially in India, the idea of a hot shower is something that a lot of people look forward to, because a lot of people don't have access to electricity, and as a result, to geysers or to boiling water, which they can then use. So I think it's also a thing that we've been told is as an advancement, you get to a better place in life where you can have access to hot showers. But and you go and tell that person, no, actually go jump into a cold lake. They're like, bugger that. I'm not. So yeah, I think it's a lot of the messaging.
Yeah, I think it's, this is a kind of new. I mean, like, literally, there's a show going on the BBC, I think next week or in a couple of weeks, where I think it will create a lot of awareness about. They take a bunch of celebrities and basically throw them into ice water, and
Not slap them, right?
Yeah, they go screaming into ice water, I think. So I think it's an interesting. I think it's going to open up a conversation, and you realize, it's interesting. Wim Hof, who's popularized this, so he's this Dutch. He's actually a world record holder in the sense that he's done a bunch of athletic. He does funny things, like he climbed Mount Everest in his shorts. He didn't get to the top. He went to 24,000 feet, but
that's
basically
high enough. Yeah,
shorts and no shirt.
That's crazy.
He climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, sandals, shorts, and no shirt. He's run an Arctic marathon, same thing. But his belief is interesting. He believes that our addiction to clothing, in particular, furniture and clothing, has made us weak.
Right.
And that's what part of what his theory is that you don't need as much clothing. And he spends the entire winter, if I remember correctly, like more or less in his sandals and his t-shirt. Like, he lives in northern Poland, and I think he just spends the entire winter outside in the cold. Like the monks.
This is amazing. Yeah, months in the cold. And this is another repeating theme, right? If you read books on spirituality and yogis, that's all they wear, especially the ones, I mean, I don't know them all. Like, I don't pretend that I know. But the ones who meditate in the caves and the ones who are deep into a spiritual practice, they can really survive wearing a thing like a loincloth, right? They actually survive winters. And as you said, the weakness comes also from material attachment, right? Because they don't have a big wardrobe to lug around, so they are free to travel and explore the various shrines or wherever the spiritual journey takes them. So I find that remarkable, not just that this person is continuing it, but it is a repeating theme over the course of history. And it's just that we seem to more and more shun that for material comforts, and metaphorically and physically, we keep adding more and more layers between us and, if you want to call it, the truth or the experience that human beings really craved in the past, and that we are so easily just sort of adding more illusion to it, right?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. The monks who started this, that was one of the famous demonstrations that they would put wet sheets on them, and they would have the ability to dry sheets. But what's interesting is that I've followed, there's scientists who essentially demonstrated the principle of how it works. The principle of it is that when people have like a kind of fitness around cold exposure, they're able to marshal their brown fat to burn glucose very quickly. So the reason why Wim Hof can climb Mount Everest like seemingly naked, because you're like, how can a guy be in the winds of the Himalayas, naked? Is that basically his body is ramping up its heat producing process, creating a kind of shield of warmth,
like an inner thermos,
and
like an inner kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like I can't get the word anyway. Like a furnace. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he literally calls it inner fire. That's the name of it, and that name actually comes from the original Nepalese or Indian. I get into trouble because I mentioned it. I think it was sort of codified in Nepal, but I think the monks were themselves Indian. I mean, it doesn't matter.
I mean, it's all one region. I think we're just sort of now trying to get our egos involved, going, it's literally 1 inch across the borders. Yeah. But how was that experience? So you went to shoot this you went to cover this particular group of monks or this place for cold fever. So when did you go, and how was that experience? I mean, how is Nepal, and how are these people? Are they oblivious to what's happening in the outside world with the pandemic, and or if they are, what is their approach to this thing? Like, do they have are they caught up? Are they swept up in the tide of panic and fear and all of that?
Okay, well, good question. I loved Nepal. I was really impressed with it. But the best way I would explain it is I had a very weird experience, and I think you might find this funny.
Mm.
Basically, we had figured out on a map the exact location of the cave where the monks had codified tumo breathing. So tumo breathing is the breathing technique that later becomes inner fire, which Wim Hof popularizes through breath work.
Right. What's the
So
name? Sorry, I didn't get that.
it's called inner fire,
Okay. No,
or
is there
sorry,
another
the
word to it?
original name. Sorry, the original name, the Nepalese name is tumo. I'm
Tumo.
not sure
Okay.
why it's called tumo, and it's the principle of inner fire. So
Okay.
we knew where the cave was. We knew that it was along a river that essentially snakes through Kathmandu, but we didn't know much more than that. So the crew and I, we basically we arrive in Kathmandu. I think it's our second or third day there, and we head off into this to the river to sort of walk up the river to where the cave is.
Hmm.
And we arrive there, we realize there's a lot going on. There's like a huge temple, and then
Hmm.
we notice there's smoke, acrid white smoke everywhere. And then when we get to the river, we see there are pyres, and on the pyres there are burning human bodies. Now,
Okay.
Indians probably don't find this too shocking, but Westerners do.
Yeah.
Uh, I had never seen anything like it, but
Mm.
basically, by what's interesting is that the original Buddhist uh, cave, which is itself a kind of Buddhist temple, had become, and over time, over 1,000 years, surrounded by a much larger Hindu temple, which
Ah.
is the main cremation center for Kathmandu, exactly like
Oh.
the way the Ganges is, I
Yeah.
imagine, for Hindus. It's the same thing. So literally, so it was a very, you might find this funny. We were very shocked because we realized we were inhaling burning
Mm.
flesh, something that we were just not used to.
And also,
And
was that the regular practice? Because I mean, in the Ganga, people also immerse the body and they let the river cleanse, and they have various practices around the along the banks of the Ganga, which vary. I don't know what those details are, but what happened in for instance in Bangalore is during the height of say last May or June, the pandemic, a lot of the electric crematoriums were, I mean, chock a block. Like they really were running overtime. So they had to create these, I wouldn't say traditional, but these sort of, they had to go back to that form of burning wood fire pyres. So was
yes,
this that, or is this the practice
yeah,
regularly?
it was burning wood fire, and I have to
Mm.
say it was very shocking to me, and I'm sort of displaying my ignorance and naivety perhaps, because I just that was not the goal of this particular shoot, was not to explore the crematorium,
Yeah,
and but it happens that the temple is literally inside the crematorium,
right.
and
No, but
luckily
I
we
haven't
had
seen a wood fire pyre either, so it will be quite. I
oh
mean,
yeah
because I mean, I've been to a couple of funerals, and it was basically the body just being put in this giant oven, and then the doors are closed, and you get the ashes 24 hours later. But it's
no,
a lot
it's a
more
pyre,
real. It's a lot more
yeah,
real when the body is actually, it's not covered, right? It's literally on a bed of
that's right,
firewood, and
yeah.
that is a lot more. I don't know. I don't know what I feel about that, because I mean, number one, I haven't witnessed that. Number two, I haven't lost anyone dear and seen them on that. But I remember my granddad's brother was burnt on a wooden pyre, and I remember that being broadcast on TV because he was a famous poet, and I was just like, I mean, you can see the face is visible, and I'm just like, that is a real sort of experience of the mortal remains not holding the soul anymore, right? Like you're seeing that person who you have a physical attachment to being taken in the flames, and I don't know, it's quite I don't know if it's emotional or it's quite profound, the impact.
It was, and I would say it was luckily we had some Nepalese that the people that we were interviewing,
Yeah,
not about tumo breathing,
yeah,
had a lot of insights. They what they said to me is, they said, we grew up with this. We
yeah,
know this. We've been here many times to see relatives, and think about it. I mean, how do you honor the dead? I mean, we just throw people in the ground where we know they're decaying.
yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't seem any more um,
Dignified, or
dignified,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So I found it quite intriguing. I mean, the shocking part was was to be inhaling. I mean, we would joke that
Mm.
it was a smell of barbecue because there's burning flesh.
Yeah. Oh,
So it was like
it
being
did.
at a very
Okay.
surreal
That's
barbecue.
weird. Your mouth starts watering.
Yeah, no, I don't think my mouth was watering yet. But yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah,
Yeah, like what?
yeah,
Who am I really?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
Oh god,
and
that's
then
funny.
we eventually did find the cave, and the cave is interesting because in a sense the story is very obvious. The cave is right by the river. The river is cold. It comes down from the Himalayas. If you were going to meditate in that cave, you would need to have a system of warming yourself up,
Yeah.
especially through the winter, through the Nepalese winter. So we were able to sort of, and of course we saw that we got people to show us the breath work, and Tumo breathing is actually fairly complicated compared to some of the pop breath works that are out there now, but I think that's
Mm.
fine. I think when I teach people breath work, I want it to be simple and easy. I don't actually usually teach people Tumo just because it's a little bit complicated.
So I want to ask you, since you're a person practicing and teaching, a lot of times, when it comes to different things, whether it's the Wim Hof method or whether it's the pranayama, which has various forms, there is the Kundalini practice of breath work. There's so many things. And for someone who's trying to use breath work to kind of use that practice to tame the mind or to sort of still the mind and quieten it to get to a place where they can focus on beyond the breath and beyond the physical body, you get confused because you get apps now like Headspace and Calm. Then you have all these different YouTube videos. You have different playlists on Spotify, whatever it may be. So is it because I've read somewhere that especially in your pursuit of God, if that's the word you want to use, or the spiritual journey, don't get caught up in the practice and the physical distractions because it's so easily overwhelming, right? That someone's like, no, you shouldn't do this kriya, you should do Sudarshan kriya, you should not do this breathing, you should do the Wim Hof. And everyone has an opinion, of course, in today's day and age of information overload. But what is there like a basic principle which you would recommend when you're approaching breath work? Like just stick to something you're comfortable with or stick to a certain pattern? What would it be?
Well, I think there's a great renaissance of breathwork going on right now. So it's an exciting time.
Right.
I'm actually developing breathwork for vision restoration. I did my own breathwork for laughing, where it's laughing breathwork.
Okay.
But I want to tell you sort of an interesting story. I think it's an opportunity to talk about something that I don't think I could ever get into a film, but it is a kind of amazing phenomena.
Yeah,
So
I'd
one
love
of
that.
the fashionable kinds of breathwork right now are often called DMT breathwork. So DMT breathwork references the states that often the hallucinations that people experience in breathwork, and the people are
Is that the
really
DMT
active.
mushroom which creates that space?
So DMT, probably a good way of explaining, is also the active ingredient in ayahuasca. Has a
Oh,
particular,
okay. The other one is psilocybin, right? Which is the
yeah,
mushroom. Okay, so DMT is in ayahuasca. Okay,
and,
got it. Sorry for
and there's kind
interrupting.
of like there's some science. There's like a lot of folk science around it. So one theory is that the pineal gland creates DMT when you die. That's why you hallucinate, or that stuff is a little confusing. What I find is interesting is that there's a bunch of science that shows that DMT's role in the body is to save cells from oxygen starvation. And one of the powerful parts of breath work is the outward breath hold. So outward breath hold is you inhale for a while, then you breathe all your air out, and then
Yeah.
you hold your breath, which is counterintuitive. Like, why wouldn't you inhale all your breath in and then hold your breath? Wouldn't that be easier? But what actually happens when you push all the oxygen out is you enter a different state. And one
Yeah.
theory is that the DMT arrives. The sign that DMT arrives is a certain kind of hallucination. People often experience this feeling of being behind themselves, or they see flickering lights, or a feeling of being sitting around a fire. These common descriptions, simply accomplished through breathing. So I've been sort of wrestling with what's going on, like what's going on here.
Yeah.
And here's my explanation: that the evolution has prepared animals. Evolution reuses so many mechanisms. So, for example, we're oxygen addicted creatures. We need oxygen desperately. When we move over to our DMT state, which can happen when you go deep into this kind of breath work, suddenly for a short time, often 2 or 3 minutes at a time, you are no longer oxygen dependent. And you now see the world of non-oxygen dependent creatures. So people often experience presences, entities, weird feelings that somebody else is there. And I've been trying to wrestle with like, what's going on? How can it just be accomplished through breathing? Is it maybe just a mental distortion?
Yeah.
But I think what it is that when you have the short period where you leave the oxygen world, you now see another world. And I should explain that, for example, plants use DMT quite a bit, often in self-defense. But it just may be that it's an example of how the world is much weirder than we think.
You know, it's amazing you mentioned that, because there's a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi, which is the life of Sri Paramahans Yoganand, who was the person who allegedly, I think, but he brought yoga to the West, to America. He's got his center in I think in California.
Yeah, is it Yogananda?
Yoganand, yeah. So his teacher,
sure.
Sri Yukteswar, actually tells him that, he says, breathlessness is deathlessness. And that's just sort of resonates with what you're saying. And I read somewhere else, in fact, there's a lady who I just interviewed for this podcast who's a neuroanatomist and neuroscientist at Harvard. And she had, I'm sure you've heard of her, a book called My Stroke of Insight, which is her experience.
Julie Bold Taylor, yeah.
Yeah, so I interviewed Dr. Taylor for the podcast, and she has a line in her book where she says, when you exhale, that's when you experience God. That's God, of course, being a word for spirituality or the spiritual experience or the divine, whatever the label you want to put on it, that's your call. But when you inhale, you soak in all, or you take in all the material surroundings. But when you exhale, you let go, and you that closer to the world beyond the material. So it's amazing that you mentioned that. In the sense, it's not amazing that it exists, but it's happening everywhere around us, right? So it's quite brilliant.
There's an interesting study. So people who do this kind of breath holding often notice physiological changes. One of them is their skin softens, and they may look a bit younger. And the explanation is that when you hold your breath with your breath out, you create a crisis for the body. There's no oxygen. And what the body does is it actually generates natural human growth hormone and actually creates fresh red blood cells in the blood in real time. So
it's cleansing your body almost?
Say that again?
Is it almost like a cleanse, like a deep cleanse every time you hold that breath on the exhale?
I would say cleanse. I'm trying to think. It's almost like a reboot.
A reboot, okay.
It's actually by creating this little crisis, the body comes through, and so and I can even point you to a study. It's just rare that studies have sort of excited language in their headlines, but there's a study called I think it's the surprising benefits of intermittent hypoxia. So the scientific term for breath holding is intermittent hypoxia, because your deliberate hypoxia as you're holding your breath. So they are shocked by how good intermittent hypoxia is for the body. You can't overdo it.
So how often do you do it, since you're mentioning that point? Just so I don't want people to just go and practice it right now, going, I'm going to hold my breath for the rest of the day. No. Yeah.
I do breath work every day.
Okay, no, but this particular practice of letting go of the breath and then holding. Yeah.
I do it a lot, because I should have mentioned even another weird thing. I just don't want to sound crazy, but one of the weird side effects for me personally is that I used to have pretty whitish hair. I don't know if you noticed that top of my head is actually pretty, the top just is dark. That's, I believe, from intermittent hypoxia. And I tried to figure out why. I just noticed one day somebody said to me, how come your hair is getting darker? I was like, I don't know. And I looked it up. And so when people are concerned with going gray, they will get illegal injections, because it's a bit dangerous, I think, of human growth hormone.
Oh, yeah.
And that will slow down the graying process.
I mean, even people take collagen for their skin, all these things. No, but it's amazing how this intermittent idea is also being applied with diets, right? Whether you talk about restricted feeding, where you eat just one meal a day in a certain window,
Totally right.
or you
What
do
this
a 3-day fast.
you're
It's
hitting the.
actually
I'm
cleansing
excited.
your. Sorry.
So I only want to cut you off because you're hitting the nail on the head,
Yeah.
which
No,
is
no.
that.
I think with this way, sort of, we kind of wanted to chat about your documentaries and thing, but we're going down a really interesting path because I think I tell myself that when I mean, I'm more and more I believe in this, that when you're on this journey, and I don't want to sound, as I said, I don't want to sound like a mystic or a romantic, but when you're seeking spirituality, it finds you. And I think these are the kind of encounters and the experiences and the people, which is so fascinating. So anyway, so I just want to thank you again while we're on that point. But
Of course.
yeah, I'll let you take over from here.
I was going to say, well, the reason I say you hit the nail on the head is that a bunch of people have now recognized. I just think we're just having the epiphany together.
Yeah.
That provoking these sort of healthy crises. So, for example, holding your breath for 2 minutes with your breath out, that's provoking a crisis.
Yeah.
Or intermittent fasting, which is not eating for certain, or exposing yourself to cold water for a short period of time, not a long period of time. These short crises are natural ways of improving health, seemingly in some cases in real time. You can actually see the difference. And like I said, I've had experiences. My skin got softer, my hair got darker. People say I look younger. I wasn't, that wasn't my goal, but I was just surprised that it happened.
Yeah.
And breathwork has so many. What's interesting about breathwork is it doesn't do just one thing. I think there's breathwork for deep calm. There's breathwork, as I mentioned, I do breathwork for laughter. There's all kinds of different breathworks. But the joke is, and maybe it's not a joke, breathwork is the new yoga, and I think so too. You know why? Because a lot of the best breathwork can be done over your computer. So there's a channel called there's a really amazing guy named Dan Vadney. He's a friend of mine, but he's a channel called Breathwork Beats.
Yeah.
And it's all musicalized breathwork. So you just sit and you do it to the beat, and it just goes by so fast, and you feel so good. You do it in the morning, you do it in the evening, if you want to do it long, and people do. I even do something called mystical breathwork, where we deliberately try to get to the very weird states.
Breathwork beats, and of course I'll share the details for your thing in the description. But no, this is something which is fascinating because I think the biggest problem now, you look at people who breathe through their mouth, and I think all of us have had that problem, and people have now sleep apnea, they have sleeping disorder, other sleeping disorder. But what I find remarkable is how we use these things like the words yoga and breathwork, and breathwork technically is an arm of yoga. And what we kind of have, we still kind of revert to these main narratives, right, which is the capitalist material kind of world, and we kind of foray into this. And I know more and more people, especially in the West now, are taking this up as a practice, and I think it happens when they go through a certain crises, especially, and once it goes to the West and comes back, Indians love it. They're like, oh, it's been stamped by the West and we need to do it now again. But
I've always wondered about that. It's funny when I always find that Indians are almost uncomfortable when somebody says, this originates with India and yoga, because it's as if you don't want to be seen as like Mr. Yoga or something like that. And also, I find that Indians almost avoid yoga because they're trying to avoid being like a walking stereotype.
Yeah, now it's I think more people are embracing it, and they're like being more proud of it. But that's the weird part, right? I think when it gets the stamp, the export stamp, I think it gets accepted more. But you mentioned this breathwork, and especially remotely being taught breathwork by various people. I think what happens sometimes, it's great because the dispersion is a lot more. People across the world can get access to it. But sometimes that's why I mentioned to you about the recording, if we can get a backup besides Zoom, because the weirdest thing you need is when you're doing like long holds and the internet freezes up. The next thing, you're just 5 minutes and you think it's a part of the breath work, but the person's like trying to frantically reconnect. And I've actually had that happen to me. And with actually, fortunately not holding my breath, but with asana practice. And suddenly I'm like, am I supposed to still be here? And the guy's like reconnecting, going, no, you should have ended that whole like 5 minutes back. So yeah.
Yeah, that's happened to me where I often given a breath workshop and the internet freezes, and it's been a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. But it's even it's funny that in the breathwork world, I mean, it's a very interesting subculture. There's people even believe that it's okay to black out. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Meaning,
I
if
don't
you
know.
actually held
Yeah.
your breath too long and you blacked out, that would be okay because you just come back to. But it seems a little extreme.
Yeah.
But there's a,
So have you seen any
there's
of these extreme things? I mean, because I feel the moment something like this crops up, you have, I wouldn't even say the mystical, you have the people like the guys from Jackass who would probably like, inhale carbon monoxide just to see what happens, right?
yeah. Well, I think that's yeah. I think carbon monoxide is a bad idea.
Yeah,
But
we're stamping that so no one goes and tries that. No, carbon
by the way, I
monoxide
made a
isn't good.
documentary that dealt with the jackass. It's called Stupidity. It's more about the culture of deliberate stupidity. I think that's a
Okay,
phenomenon,
so
particularly in
where can
American.
where can people find, since we're on your documentary?
They're some of them are easier to find than others. I think Stupidity. I mean, it's probably on YouTube. Laughology, you can just find on YouTube. It's free.
Fantastic.
You
Okay.
Are What You Act. So another documentary is called You Are What You Act, which is the science of embodied cognition. So it's
Uh-huh.
basically the idea of the way your body feeds back to you. Power posing. It's a weird
Mm.
story, actually. You Are What You Act is about. I basically found that a number of American movie stars
Mm.
had become their roles in real life. Like Tom Cruise, who plays his heroic roles, he
Right.
actually, in real life, he's actually rescued 6 or 7 people that were in trouble. Harrison Ford has done it 3 or 4 times.
That's crazy.
Jamie
Okay.
Foxx did it. Jamie Foxx pulled a guy out of a burning truck. And it's almost like a metaphor for the way you manifest your reality. That if you live in a movie, there's a new kind of therapy I do with hypnosis, which I call movie therapy,
Mm.
where I started recognizing that if you look at Tom Cruise lives in a good movie. He lives in a world where he's a movie star. He's very rich,
Mm.
kind of can, do whatever he wants. And I started recognizing that people that were unhappy or people that were troubled would come to me, and I would say to them, I'd say, it seems like uh, your life is a bad movie. It's like black and white. You're not the hero of your own story. You're there's no love possibilities. There's no passion, and it's a very interesting way to fix somebody's life.
It's
To sort of
interesting
say,
that you mentioned that, because a lot of people in the mental health space will sort of recognize, and I'm not an expert in the mental health space, but you have these things where you're told that your life is your own movie and you can write your own script, and that's exactly what you just said. I mean, it's kind of, many times you are the biggest sort of antagonist in your own movie, right? Where you are being surrounded by people who are bigger wins, people are putting you down, but it's literally as easy as saying, you know what, I'm going to rewrite the script. But it's not as easy, but in hindsight it is. No, it's amazing.
that's right. I mean, part of it is it still requires what's called calibration, meaning
Mm,
if somebody decides they would like to make more money, is it as easy as them just deciding I'm going to make more money, or they have to also think about where they might make more money in their area of business.
yeah.
It's not as simple. In fact, one of the traps is excessive magical thinking, where you just go, well, if I just imagine piles of cash falling through my door, then that will
Yeah.
happen. But
No.
yeah, no. But see, on the other hand, there's a really interesting study of gold medalists in the Olympics, where basically they found out that who virtually no one who wins a gold medal was not trying to win a gold medal, meaning they were in the business of visualizing themselves winning a gold medal.
Right.
And so this applies to life,
Yeah.
where if you want something, it's important to visualize and imagine it. The people that are more likely to get things are not people who think, well, fortune might just follow me, or they are in the business of searching it out, looking for it.
It's
Um,
yeah, it's the messaging to your mind and body, right? That I deserve this, so I'm going to seek it, kind of thing.
yeah.
No, it's fantastic that people out there are trying this. I mean, I'm so glad you covered it. But so you have Stupidity, which is one of your documentaries. Then you have, I think we can do an entire episode on each of your documentaries. I think it's great that.
What's interesting about Stupidity is it explored the concept of deliberate stupidity, meaning that, for example, in America, it's very unfashionable to be a deep thinker. You know, it's much more fashionable to be a sort of a limbic rock star, you know, but literally there's a very strong anti-intellectual component to America. Jackass is like a really good example.
And also picking up catchphrases from movies and do you think that sort of it becomes a herd mentality? Like, because I've been trying to understand my position and my appreciation or lack of rather for cliques and groups. And in fact, my wife and I were talking about this just a few days back, and I'm like, I don't like what groups make individuals into, because I'd love to talk to a person one-on-one to get to know them beyond a certain label they identify with. But the moment that person's put into a group, whether it's a school group, whether it's a college group, whether it's old friends, whatever, families, the entire dynamics change, and you can almost see that individual giving up a lot of themselves to fit into the larger structure of what that group demands of them. So is that something you came across while doing Stupidity?
I mean, I filmed in some riots where definitely you saw, I think it was, I think it was more peculiar than that, meaning the twist in Stupidity was, we're at a time where everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket. They have access to more knowledge than ever before, yet they choose stupidity.
TikTok or Insta Reels or whatever you call them.
Yeah, and there's some interesting reasons for that. Like, for example, if you and I were in a competition to get more viewers, and you were like, well, I'm going to write a bunch of very powerful essays about the social political situation, and I said I'm going to film a bunch of people falling down the stairs. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? And that's also more to do with neuroscience in a weird way. I'm more interested in people falling down the stairs than I am in understanding the geopolitics of Asia or something like that. So
yeah, absolutely. This is the case with anything, right? Long form is one other thing, right? Would you rather have your information given to you in 5 seconds by, something which flashes in front of your screen, or would you like to listen to something for longer? And clearly the short form is more consumable. But yeah.
Also, I think the tradition of intelligence was very linked to linguistic traditions, meaning smart people were always people who read books, who wrote, and in fact, that part of the problem is that's not all intelligence. That there are lots of forms of intelligence that are not book oriented or not book smart.
Yeah,
and also that limiting. Like I try to give you a good example, but there's some very brilliant people like Lady Gaga. I would give an example of, but you wouldn't call Lady Gaga book smart, but she's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And So I think that,
I find someone like a David Blaine quite remarkable in their own sort of way, not in the conventional academic space or in academia, but just with the way he's pushed his mind and, the potential of his mind and body. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, I know. I agree too. He famously spent, I can't remember, was it 13 minutes in ice water or 14? He did some crazy ice thing as well. It's exceptional. He's really, I don't know if I understand how he does it,
Yeah. But what's strange, about a person like a David Blaine or a Lady Gaga is they're kind of trivialized in the media, and only certain aspects of their achievements are sort of forced down people's throats, right? So whether it's Instagram, whether it's okay, Lady Gaga, Star is Born, okay, she has 2,000 hits, whatever. But the entire story of what she's done for herself, the way she's figured out navigating in this world of celebrity or navigating in this world of creativity and keeping her integrity. I don't know her well, but I don't even know her story that well. But she seems like one of those people who's not just a pawn of Disney or not just one of these, what's the word? Like these child celebrities who've been created by these big companies and just are sort of tossed off once their worth is gone. She seems to have created a pretty good foundation that she's in charge of, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know her either, but that seems she's definitely an interesting character, and yeah, and I think the frightening thing is that most other stars are manufactured. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's the reality. They are completely manufactured. So she's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah,
Um,
it's nice to hear that there is wiggle room for someone who wants to make it and make it on their own terms, I suppose. But no, I'd like to go back to that part you mentioned before we started recording of your experience with India, because that also ties into your other documentary, Laughology. And, you know, we started talking about comedy and humor and the entire climate of how people and censorship and how political correctness and woke culture and cancel culture, all these things. But you mentioned the essence of your documentary, which is laughter and not humor. And I'd like you to talk about that and just tell people what the documentary is about, but also what you discovered through understanding laughter versus humor.
so yeah, so I think for me, one of the most important films I've made is Laughology, which I made, you know, almost 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's the first film it's the first feature documentary about laughter.
Mm-hmm.
And people, when they hear that, they're like, is that possible? But the explanation is there's a lot of films about humor. You know, there's probably a
Yeah.
lot of films about Charlie Chaplin and things like that. But it was the first film to say, like, what is laughter? And laughter is like a really curious, bizarre behavior. You know, it's a coded system of bonding. One theory is it opens the door to play. I personally believe that it actually created the greatest revolution of all time, which has allowed mammals to play in a world that was dominated by reptiles who don't play. They play a little bit, but they don't really play.
They're not
And
really fun. Yeah. They don't
play
look
allows
fun.
they don't look, yeah, crocodiles don't look like a barrel
Yeah.
of laughs.
I wouldn't have them at
Yeah,
my show.
no,
Just in the front row. Yeah.
a pit of crocodiles at your show. Yeah, so exactly, they'll bite
They might
you.
not get offended at least, but yeah.
Yeah, so laughter is this very interesting phenomenon. One is that it's actually one of the proofs, strange proofs of human universality. So
Okay.
all human babies start laughing at approximately 3 weeks, 4 weeks, regardless of culture, regardless of race or civilization. It's a
Wow.
human
Okay.
universal. Yeah, it's all the same, and they're not taught to laugh by their parents. It's like this it's this intrinsic behavior. And one theory is that laughter is the beginning of language. And one of the signs that language came to dominate laughter, and one of the indications of that is that you always laugh kind of after you talk. So a person will say something like, "Isn't it hilarious that we're doing this podcast?" And then they'll laugh, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they won't laugh first. If I laugh first, like, "Ha ha ha, we're doing this podcast," you'd be like, "Albert, you sound insane."
Yeah.
Um,
What's more
there's
insane though, Albert, is I heard a person that I was saying something. I hope it was funny, but other people laughed. And this girl who's a lot younger, she's maybe 21, and she just went, lol. And I said, did you just say the word LOL to my joke? Like, that is
Yeah,
interesting. So I mean, that sort
yeah,
of ties into what you're just saying, like
yeah, that is interesting.
the reflex of laughing to this new emoji culture where they sort of just use abbreviations to express their emotions. I wonder what that's going to do to them.
Yeah, I wonder too. Yeah,
So what
because
does
you're
laughter do?
better off.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Well, I should explain in the film. So part of my story and how it relates to India, I've had some crazy experiences in India. Let me tell you. So what happened is, when I was shooting Laughology, part of the story dealt with laughter yoga. So laughter yoga is the first laughter exercise system. The idea was that you could harness the positive influences, the antidepressive qualities of laughter. Laughter is a natural antidepressant by simply laughing, but you need to find a way to exercise it. So
Right.
this fellow in Mumbai, Madan Kataria, basically has a flash in the middle of the night where he thinks if people just imitate the behaviors of laughter, maybe they are themselves contagious. So there's 3 primary laughs: ha ha ha, ho ho ho, he he he. And the truth is that if you sit around with a bunch of people and you literally just go ha ha ha, ho ho ho, and he, you
I
will
mean, I'm
actually
smiling
start to,
already. Yeah.
yeah, you'll start to laugh.
Yeah.
So out of this, he develops laughter yoga. Laughter yoga then spreads to, I don't know, 70 countries or 90 countries. It's become quite an international movement. I had learned it in Canada. So in the film, part of the idea was to fly to Mumbai,
Hmm.
meet Madan Kataria, and see him doing laughter yoga in his own city. What I
Yeah.
didn't know too is that this peculiar tradition, which is an Indian tradition of people walking in the morning in parks.
Yeah.
So that was totally exotic to me, that people get up in the morning, they sort of walk around parks, they say hello. So he figured out that why not
Especially
have
Mumbai,
people.
because of the space constraint, they do have these a lot of the groups that sort of walk in the park, they exercise in the park. The park becomes quite a social
That's right.
hub for people there.
So I was shooting in Africa before I arrived. I should tell you this. It's even a weirder story.
Mm.
In Africa, there was a laughter epidemic in 1962. It's called the Tanzanian laughter epidemic, where
Really?
35,000 people started laughing for 6 months. It's quite a weird story. You can look it
Wow.
up.
I
Yeah,
mean, oh, that just sounds bizarre. Like,
yeah.
that sounds like a great thing. Like, it's anyway, but
I interviewed people who had been there, and they said it wasn't that fun because people felt like they were possessed. They just
okay,
couldn't stop. They
for
would
six
go to,
months. Okay,
yeah.
yeah, you
Not
can.
everyone was 6 months, but some people it went for 6 months. But they would go to sleep laughing, and they would wake up laughing. And then they would laugh all
Wow.
day.
So why
And then
was that?
people
Was
would.
that something in the air? Was there something like
It's
what?
it's
What is the
kind of a
trigger?
mystery, but the explanation. One theory was malarial fever. They thought it was maybe just a side effect of malarial fever, but that was ruled out.
Okay.
And then the best explanation is something they say it's something like mass psychogenic illness, which is also what's maybe going on in the pandemic, where
Hmm.
the theory, what happened at that time in Tanzania, Tanzania colonized by the British. In 1961, Tanzania had been turned back to the Tanzanians by the British. And so the British ran the education system. Until then, it was a fairly authoritarian system. And then there was a big hullabaloo that finally the Tanzanians get to run our own education system. And then when they switched over, it was even more authoritarian than the previous system. And the students
Hmm.
in the schools basically lost their minds. Apparently, like basically the way that the epidemic started, it was an
Yeah.
epidemic. Three young girls in one school just basically lost it and could not stop laughing. I even have the
Yeah.
diary of the school. I found the school where it started, and they stopped laughing. The teacher asked them to stop. They kept laughing. The principal came. They threatened to hit them. They kept laughing. Kept laughing. Then it spread to
Hmm.
all the other students. Soon the entire school was laughing, and the principal just gave up and sent the students home. But they actually infected the city, and so
Ooh.
this town started laughing, and then it spread from town to town to parts of Uganda and Tanzania. And this is something that's happened before. There's been some laughing epidemics, and even in the US around some churches, it
Hmm.
can happen. So the explanation is more that we have the ability to get into a behavior very deeply if it sort of serves us. So,
Yeah.
if I'm at this point where the world is so ridiculous, or what you're
Yeah.
telling me is so ridiculous, and I start laughing, and then you tell me like stop laughing, but I can't help it, maybe I just keep going, you know? So
Yeah. Maybe
that's the best.
it's no. Just thinking out loud. Sorry for interrupting. Just that idea. I'd rather laugh now than intellectualize all this fake news, misinformation, this
Yeah,
flooding of hate and violence and greed. Would you give me 6 months of laughter? I don't know. It just sounds much better, right? Because you know what? It's so out of control. It's so ridiculous. Just laugh it off. And I don't know. It sounds better than the constant noise, which is
I agree.
otherwise
I
occupying our
agree.
minds.
Totally, I agree. Um, the other aspect of this particular part of Tanzania is that the families are very close, and
Ah,
so their emotional states tend to be shared. So
okay.
that was part of the mystery of it as well. Uh, but what made this experience very strange is that basically I went to Tanzania. It was this big journey to find the original school where the Tanzanian laughter epidemic started. Found the school, literally found the principals had a log where he describes the epidemic, how it started. So it was mind blowing. And then we got the students of the school
Yeah.
to recreate it. So if you see Laughology, you're going to see a scene from the school where the laughter epidemic starts, and it's students of the school recreating it.
How cool.
Um,
Now, I want to talk
and
about how you find these things, like even with the cave or with, I mean, you mentioned the cave, but how do you, in a world like where a lot of the stuff gets lost and also gets glorified, so people recreate a fake kind of school because they know this has become like a tourist destination. But how do you seek the truth? I want to talk about that a little later. But so you went to Tanzania to kind of find the origin of this laughter pandemic or the laughter epidemic, and you come to Bombay, or you come seeking the person who started the laughter yoga.
literally,
So maybe, yeah,
I get on the plane to Mumbai, and as the plane, I think we were flying through, I can't remember where, but maybe Ethiopia. And literally, as I'm leaving Ethiopia, there's some news about a massacre taking place in Mumbai. And when I land, the massacre is already in effect. I'm at the airport, but still, I don't know if you remember, but it was like such a terrible experience. And
yeah.
for me, I'd come from Tanzania, kind of
I mean,
laughing
for
a
those
lot.
people who don't know, it's the Albert's referring to like the hostage situation at the Oberoi Hotel, and I think it was Oberoi Hotel, and it basically the terrorist attack on Bombay, and it was surreal because
As I
just the
understand, about 10 or 11, heavily armed terrorists went
yeah,
through downtown Mumbai,
pretty much,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
shooting everybody they could. And what was odd was the local security forces were armed with old antique rifles, and they couldn't do
Yeah.
anything.
No,
And it
and
was
yeah, there was a lot of noise around it because, of course, it wasn't as bad as the noise during the pandemic, but it was still the media picking up on it and sensationalizing it and giving away information to the terrorists. I mean, all those speculations were going around. But yeah, it also sort of showed gaping flaws in the way our, especially local forces are armed. But then again, there was a delay with the special forces coming in, who finally did come in. I think they really did save the day. But
yeah.
you landed in Bombay at that point, covering a topic like laughter. So it must have been quite surreal.
Well, and not only that, Madan Kataria. So part of the massacre took place at the Taj Mahal in the Taj Hotel
Yeah, yeah.
in downtown. And what upset Madan Kataria was that he goes there almost every day, and it just happened that that day he didn't go.
Whoa,
He
okay.
and so he realized he'd almost been there. And so it was a very interesting situation because um, we did the interview. The interview was fine. We were able to sort of talk objectively about the origins of laughter yoga, but the emotions around. I remember that I interviewed a group of women there. The women and the men often laugh separately, but I spent time with the women, and I asked them, like literally the massacre I guess it just ended, and I just remember that when people laughed, they also cried.
Yeah.
And so it was a very somber thing. And now they didn't do laughter exercises right away. The feeling was that to honor the dead, they waited 3 days, but then
Yeah.
they started again. And the point of it in the film was to demonstrate that laughter, that's important to laugh or be able to laugh, even in the face of darkness. And but anyways, I will never forget being in Mumbai. I mean, I also, as a reporter, because part of my training as a standard reporter, I went to the crime scenes and I saw what had happened. It was very shocking. And so that was quite a disturbing experience.
Yeah.
And other than that, it was weird because I had otherwise a very positive feeling about India. It was just gory, and
Now, I think
let's
really
explain the
shocked a
other.
lot of people. Despite, I mean, I think
Yeah,
Indians face a lot of adversity on a daily basis with bad living conditions. Many people have a very sort of difficult time just getting by every day. But I think that universally just sort of shocked everyone into going, dude, this is not done, because we do have a lot of injustices, but that was just the next level, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of describing it. It was next level. And I should explain that. But the second time I went to India, I ended up in New Delhi speaking at a conference. It was a business summit. And
Hmm.
what was really weird was I was there as a hypnotist,
Mm.
and Modi was there.
Right.
Um, he was there. Sadhguru was there.
Okay.
It was like a really crazy, weird event.
Yeah, that's a big
And
lineup. Yeah, you must have been
yeah,
at a big conference because both of them, of course, Modi being the prime minister and Sadhguru now being quite a popular figure, especially marrying the worlds of spirituality, yoga, and practical life. I think he's also doing restorative practices for the planet with the soil campaign, etc. So it must have drawn a
yeah,
lot of attention because he's quite a public figure now.
yeah, yeah. He was. I heard him speak, and yeah, it was just great to meet him.
Yeah,
That was like in contrast to Mumbai. New Delhi was like festive and happy,
different time.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, so I want to ask you before we talk about hypnotism. I'm very intrigued because I've heard about things, and also I've had a psychiatrist friend who practiced, not practiced it on me, but hypnotherapy. But before we get there, I just want to understand because you mentioned a couple of things before we started recording about how you went to Punjab and the idea of laughter originating there. But maybe just before you talk about that and also draw a parallel between cultures that are oppressed and having laughter, where does, as a comedian, I'm very interested to know because sometimes we have these discussions going. Did that joke provoke like a guttural laugh, which was like a very belly laugh, or did it have a smile and a more intellectual acknowledgement, going, "I feel you and I find what you've done funny"? So, can you just distinguish laughter in that perspective? Like, what is a laugh, and what is something which is funny, and also what is responsible for that emotion? Is it a word? Is it a what part of the brain handles it, or maybe the muscularity of the muscular nature of laughter? So, I don't know if it's a stupid question or if it's too
no, no, it's not. Not
vague. Yeah.
in fact, on another film, I'm interviewing another laughter expert this week about fake laughter versus real laughter, and he does a very interesting thing.
Right.
So what's interesting is the brain is very good at recognizing fake laughter, and the
Mm,
reason there's an evolutionary reason for that is that if somebody is manipulating you, lying to you, deceiving you,
mm,
they might laugh in a fake way,
right.
and so it's important for you to know. Uh, that said, laughter yoga is partly based on fake laughter, but it's an exercise system. Like it's like
Yeah.
jogging is like fake running.
Yeah.
Laughter yoga is like fake
Yeah.
laughing. So, so what's interesting is that there is an enormous range of laughter that I would say misunderstood. There are so many different kinds of laughs. Some of them relate to animal laughter. So, for example, the snort laugh, which is a kind of laugh
Yeah.
that people do,
Oh, I'm
is
famous for that.
similar. You're famous for that?
I mean, they're not famous in India, but just famous amongst my circles. After a few drinks, I'm like, "Ooh, here comes the snorter," you know.
Now, you may find it interesting is that it probably is related to the way dogs laugh too. Dogs also snort when they're having fun. Snorting is like a pleasure, like feeling
Mm,
good sort of state.
yeah.
Um, and and then there's a whole bunch of like interesting laugh. Like I'm very intrigued by the diabolical laugh.
Okay.
Diabolical laugh is a very exact structure. I'll give you. I know it is. I should. You know what's funny? I realize I do so many different things. I sometimes find it confuses people, so I don't even talk about it. But I organize laughter championships because they're funny,
Hey,
and
this
I'm
is okay.
organizing the World Laughter Championship. And one of the competitions is the diabolical laugh. That's sort of the best one, one of the best ones.
That's
And
that's the stereotypical evil, the antagonist laughter in cartoons and whatnot, right? That's like the
yeah,
really deep one. Okay, that's a real thing.
but
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay.
yeah, it's also called, and it's in every language. So almost every culture describes it.
Mm,
And what's interesting is it has an exact structure, meaning there's always a sentence. So somebody will make a declaration, like the declaration, "I'm going to make a diabolical laugh." Then they
mm.
laugh once, and then the first laugh generates the second laugh. And then the second laugh generates the third laugh, which is the craziest one.
This is not staged. I'm genuinely laughing because it's not at all like, oh, the comedian in me is like, okay, this is what is he doing?
Fake.
But
Yeah.
the human being's going, dude. You know, it's yeah. And what you said, it's sort of like you make a statement and laugh. I've done that already a couple of times on this episode, which is sort of you. I love this because I'm kind of looking at myself as a subject of what you're telling me, right? You know, I'm just like, oh, I'm doing this, which is crazy. So there are these different kinds of laughters, and are they for certain situations? Are they for certain defense mechanisms? What are they for?
So some of the research around laughter, like some of the big breakthrough studies, one was this realization that most laughter is not actually related to comedy. That's a specific thing. So it's a very stereotype thing. So you go to a comedy show, people laugh a lot. But I mean, it's a very voluminous kind of laughter. But what it was Robert Provine, who was a neuroscientist, who discovered that he had students look at when people laughed, and they found that, I can't remember the statistic, but it's around 80% of laughter isn't even around humor. So for example, people laugh, if you're going through a door with somebody, it'd be like, and or great to see you, ha ha ha. There's a lot of this kind of social laughter that's just meant to, I think it's to show support, to show, it's hard to explain, but it's not, there's no joke. There's no joke being told.
I mean, I'm going to find this now remarkable, just being around people, because it's going to be stuck in my head. Because sometimes you break your head and you think you've written a really good premise and it's really funny, but then you think, I've been doing this for about 12 to 13 years now, and I'm just like, you do a bit which you really think has been honed to its best sort of form. You deliver the thing, it gets, I don't even know what it is now, and then someone falls off the chair at your show and the whole crowd just loses it. I'm like, is there any point to any of this? Because, so what happens in a comedy show? What are people doing? Are they intellectually recognizing your effort? Are they sort of going back to a place in their life where what you said happened? So what is the emotion, or what would you call that, a different kind of laughter?
I would say, well, it's funny. There's a Canadian comedian I remember who would actually was known for his nervous laughter, and I think literally he was seeding the audience by laughing. So that's a kind of comedian who will laugh a lot as he's going along. Now, there's another style which is totally deadpan, where you don't laugh at all.
Yeah.
But what I think the contagiousness of laughter is also a very interesting question. It's interesting for a lot of reasons. One reason people think it's one of the great civilizing forces. We laugh together. The tribe laughs together. One of the really interesting studies about laughter shows that we can recognize a friend's laugh at very great distance. So when we hear a friend laugh like from 2 miles away, we know it's them, which is, so it's just weird. And the explanation is that knowing who our friends are is really important, and knowing that they're safe is also important. So we have the ability to recognize a friend's laugh from great distance. The other thing I think you're describing in a really good comedy show, you have this contagious effect where people are laughing so hard, they are not only laughing at the jokes, they are laughing at the laughs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And when that happens, you've got a really good thing. Now, I think you've got a very healthy thing, meaning when people go deep. So there's a theory that literally, I often describe this thing, when you go to a really good comedy show, and I assume that maybe this happens to people when they see your work, that when you go to a really good comedy show.
Not anymore. I'm just going to stand there. I'm going to get someone from the Laughter Yoga Club. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll split half the fee with you. Just make them laugh. Yeah. Because there's no point saying anything today, because someone's going to get offended. Someone's going to say that's not politically correct. And now people applaud your material more than they laugh. So I think I'll just take your route. It's a lot better.
They're just laughing.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
I think I was saying, I'm trying to remember what I was saying.
No, you're saying when people go for a really good comedy show.
Yeah, that one of the descriptions I've heard people say, that when they go to a good comedy show, they have this feeling of a big pressure coming off their shoulders. They are de-stressing. And one of the explanations is that there's a shift in brain dominance when we laugh. So normally we're walking around in our prefrontal cortex, executive function. We're trying to decode the laugh. What the hell is going on here? What's that
Yeah.
joke about? But then when we laugh, it's purely emotional brain. And if we laugh contagiously, we're deep in the emotional brain. And now we forget about our stresses, our jobs. But the really pivotal factor is when we're out of the prefrontal cortex, we have no sense of time. So there's a really interesting thing that happens. A lot of people experience relief from financial stress when they are laughing. This is important. And why would that be? Like, why would laughter relieve you from your financial problems? Well, really interesting reason. Because the laughing brain is the limbic brain, which has no sense of time. While the prefrontal cortex, the linguistic brain, does have a big sense of time.
Right.
So
That's amazing.
So when I'm laughing really hard, I don't know what the future and I don't know the past. I'm just know now.
Which is a form of meditation in itself, right? You're
That's right.
escaping
That's right. It's the same principle of meditation. It's one of the goals in meditation is to arrive in the moment, and you can do that with laughter. When you laugh really hard, you arrive in the moment.
which is beautiful, because as a performer, as a comedian, as an entertainer, when I'm in an audience, I'm automatically in that sort of structured rational brain, the left brain, if you want to call it, where I'm analyzing, going, oh, he or she's funnier than me. What are the jokes they're doing? What is?
Right.
Oh, I can see this joke
Yeah.
coming. It's a hack joke. It's not that funny. Or I think it's a copied joke. But then the kind of if I try to break away from that and just enjoy a laugh, and it might not even be from a comedian, it might be from someone at the table, maybe a friend, maybe a musician who's saying something funny between songs. It genuinely feels like my identity, as whatever identity I want to take up at that point, is dissolving, which is quite liberating, right? Because you're so caught up trying to keep this image of, especially as a comedian, people expect you to be the authority when they're in the room with you. They're like, hey Sandeep, what do you think about that joke? I'm like, and it gets kind of claustrophobic because you have this pressure of, and people coming and saying things like, oh, I think he's funnier than you, whatever, right? But these things are all sort of slipped away when you actually laugh, and not many comedians can laugh.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A lot of them fake
That's
laugh.
right.
Yeah.
Famously, a lot of comedians are sad, or sad.
And they fake laugh. And I've noticed this, sorry, because when I'm at a comedy show and I sometimes have noticed other comedians laughing, it's almost when you said that fake laugh to manipulate what you want that person to believe. I think they do that because if they fake laugh, you give this notion to the comedian that joke is funny when it's really not. And they go away with the sense that bit is ready. And when they do it in front of a real audience, it falls flat.
Yep.
So I've seen that happen in real life.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is the soulful part of laughter. That laughter, like I said, is babies do it. It is this universal bonding behavior that unites all humankind. And it can do that. It can do that philosophically, but it also happens like when a group of people laugh together. It's quite a beautiful feeling for the group. So it's a real thing, I think. And yeah, part of, one of the principles of laughter yoga, again, it's another Indian phenomena that it's funny. Whenever I tell Indians that I do laughter yoga, that I always feel get this blank expression, right? Because
yeah,
it's like, but it's another great Indian idea, and it's spread around the world. And it's
there's a place called Cubbon Park in Bangalore, and every morning, I don't know if it's every morning, but I've been there a couple of Sundays. And you sometimes, I was a little shocked. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, have they lost the plot? But the second or third time, you just it brings a smile to your face because you know that they are really, they are in a state of non-rational, worried about what people think about them state. And it's fantastic that people are doing that,
Yeah. And if you think about your friends, I mean, what I like in friends, and I hope they like this in me, is that I don't sit in judgment for a long time before laughing. If they're funny, I just laugh.
Yeah.
And I find being an easier laugher, like doing this documentary on laughter made me a much easier laugher. I became much more less discriminating. I'll laugh at anything, because there's also because of the health benefits of laughter. Laughter is good for the heart. It strengthens the immune system. There's a lot of good aspects. aspects to laughter.
And I think that's something that's taught me with age as well. I mean, age as a performer, in the sense, earlier you're much more critical. You're like, is that a Mitch Hedberg bit? Is that a Stephen Wright bit? Is that, and you just sit and talk about bits that which other famous comedians have done. But you know what? Now I'm just like, you know what? I don't know what kind of material. I don't know what kind of comedian I'm. Am I an edgy comedian? Am I a dark humor comedian? I don't care any of that. I mean, I'm just like, I mean, during the lockdown, I did a couple of those virtual shows which were disastrous, but I was just cracking such silly jokes at home, and I would get a laugh. Like my mom or my wife would be like, "Oh my God, you need to get on stage," kind of reaction, but it would make them smile. And I think that's where I am today as a performer. I'm just like, you know what? I'd rather be off the cuff and something in the moment, which is either maybe talking to an audience member or just like, you know, it's possible, even though it might not be the best joke in hindsight, people will be like, oh, it's hack, or it's just it's a pun or something silly like that. But I'd rather do that or tell a story than have this, you know, the American approach to, or maybe Canadian approach to comedy is very calculated, right? They hit 30 open mics and fine tune the bit till it's word perfect, till it's the timing's great. I'm like, I don't think I can be that kind of comedian, at least at this point in my life, because I find it too structured, too clinical, and it just doesn't work for me. So this, what you're saying, makes a lot more sense. Like it connects with the soul and de-stresses, and it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, that was my experience too, because I had I worked in comedy too. I used to do satirical TV shows, and one of the things I did, I think this is one of the turning points in my life, was that I used to do these shows where they were just a bit dangerous. The reason that we were able to commission them is we would take actors and we'd put them in political situations. So, for example, the Prime Minister of Canada would make a public appearance, and we'd have these fake actors in front of him doing ridiculous, clowny things. We had them being cops, pretending they're protecting the Prime Minister, and then they would go and they would have sex with somebody. It was meant to be like whatever would be shocking. But at one point we got detained and arrested because we were literally, it was like a really funny experience. We had fake cops. So, you know, the undercover cops who have earphones who protect the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happens in India. We had these fake undercover cops protecting the Prime Minister. And because they were so convincing, because they were dressed up actors, the real police thought they were real and ordered them to walk the Prime Minister down a particular hallway. And then we filmed it, and we realized at that moment there was only actors protecting the Prime Minister. They weren't. It was like totally fake. And when the police realized that, they were really, really upset. Yeah. And anyways, it made me realize is that, do I have to take such enormous risks to make something funny?
There's something like what Borat does, you know, like, not Borat, but Sacha Baron Cohen. He goes to extreme lengths to risk to himself, like where he goes and goes undercover into a role, like you know, I think he was talking about like the new Borat thing, or the other one where he gets into a cage fight and then it ends up as a riot. And yeah, so what is your point of view on that kind of extreme lengths for humor or comic relief or whatever?
I mean, I think it has a time and place, and I did a lot of that. I personally did a lot of that, and I learned a lot from it. I mean, very similar to Borat kind of things. We did a satirical film where, when the Canadian Prime Minister was very unpopular, we did a film where a homeless bum essentially switches bodies with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister's in the bum's body, and he's trying to get back into his own body. Anyways, so we were shooting it in real events and real, you know, at time, and so I remember it being incredible fun, like an incredible feeling of subversive fun. But like I was going to tell you, like a turning point for me was Tom Green. Tom Green told a story where he was driving down a highway working on a show. I don't remember which show it was. And they saw a dead moose on the side of the road. And then Tom Green basically got out of the car, told them to start filming, and he stuck his head up the dead moose's ass. A rotting dead moose. And I think part of the game was to see, like, mooses are big, and it's like, can you get your head up a moose's ass? I mean, and I was like, is that what you have to do? Is that what you have to do? And I think that what you're actually talking about, and I think this is a part of comedy, is there's a kind of constant escalation of risk, of daringness. And I just got off that boat at one point. And in fact, that's when I made Laughology, I was like, the philosophical question that came to me was, what am I really looking for? I'm not looking for, I thought I was looking for the ultimate joke.
Yeah.
Thought at some point I'll find a joke that is so funny, no one will be able to say it's not, it just will be hilarious. But I found out that the ultimate joke is laughter. Laughter is what we really are after, because laughter is all the benefit. That's people feeling good, people bonding, it's loving, it's, I'm not saying all laughter is that way, but that's what laughter can be. So that was like a turning point for me. I was like, I realized I didn't want to make dangerous comedies anymore, and I just didn't enjoy that lifestyle of, I liked taking risks, but then I realized afterwards, like, I was up at night worrying about getting into trouble or getting arrested, and like Borat, and
Yeah.
so I don't envy him.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I admire what he does, but I don't think it's a good life.
No, I think you just spoke my mind, because that's exactly what I'm feeling post-pandemic, post-lockdown, is when you do these things like breath work, or you're trying to find the space of peace and empathy and compassion. Comedy in itself, whether it's stand-up or whether it's writing comedic content, is hurtful. And I'm not saying I'm not going in the context of political incorrectness, any of that, but you are trying to find that next joke, or that ultimate joke. And I think what you said was beautiful. Like, comedy, the ultimate joke is laughter. Otherwise you kind of are trying to please people who are like, oh, I'll give you a pat on the back, that line was so edgy, it was so and then you go down more and more topics which are forbidden, so-called forbidden. And I don't know, I just find, like, nowadays, I mean, I haven't done that many shows, but like, I finish a show and I'm like, I'm a little more sensitive to what I said, because earlier I would just take down a heckler, I would just take down someone, I would pick on someone. And nowadays I feel like, man, the next morning, did I get into trouble? And there was a lot of that. Did I get into trouble? Did I go too far? Was that interaction too risky? And I don't like that feeling.
I can even give you a weird insight into this, is that I did, one of the films I did dealt with MMA fighting. And I found a study. There was a very interesting study of what's the effect of watching MMA fights. You know what I mean? Mixed martial arts fights. So people watch these brutal fights. And what's interesting is that it makes people obsessed with hierarchy. So the men who watch these fights are very much like, that guy's stronger than that guy's stronger than this guy, that guy's. And I'm like, that's just like the comedy scene. People are obsessed with that guy's playing at a bigger show than me. That guy's, did this, he got more of the audience laughing. And they become obsessed with hierarchy, which is not a healthy preoccupation, as opposed to the deeper meaning of what they're doing.
Even within a show, I mean, one thing what you just mentioned is the obvious thing, which one of the things I noticed just before the lockdown, like 90% of my mental space was occupied by this conversation. Who got what gig? Who got which platform? Which one did Netflix buy? How many tickets did he sell? How many, or even if it's in the same lineup, you're like, oh, that person killed harder than you. And I'm like, this is taking away from what I enjoy. This is taking away from the appreciation of laughter. And what you're saying now is kind of like an eye-opener, and it kind of puts into perspective what I've been feeling, which is, man, I don't enjoy that feeling of being constantly on edge, constantly seeking validation. And what happens then is you become vulnerable to manipulation from others who will say things to put you up in that moment, saying, oh, you're the funniest, and the next moment take it away by saying, no, he's funnier. And that's a horror. That becomes completely opposite of what laughter is supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, okay. That's right. And in fact, and famously, people talk about the misery of comedians, that they are often depressed and miserable, and which really should not be the case, because their job is to cheer people up.
Absolutely. So, but it's not the case, that they aren't cheering themselves up because they caught up in this rat race. And I think comedians, at least from what I've heard from the podcasts I've listened to, I'm talking, of course, about people in the US, in the UK, and this thing, they just, I'm of course not generalizing, but they just take themselves too seriously, including myself. The way when I talk about comedy, it's like, oh, it's just, and sometimes I've had people say, are you talking about comedy, or are you talking about like, an illness? Like, why are you so obsessing about it? Why are you obsessed about it? Why are you obsessing over the finer details about the peripheral, which is essentially, what are you trying to do? Make people laugh. Keep the simple clear. But clearly you get distracted by all the other noise.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but
So we
I
should.
think
I should watch the time. So if we want to talk hypnosis, I probably should talk hypnosis
yes, I was going to
now.
say we've gone on, which is lovely, but I think it's getting late for you. I think you need to you need to sleep as well. But yeah, can you just tell me? I think it's an amazing topic, and I've said amazing a lot on this episode. But I frankly do find a lot of the work you've done amazing. How does someone in the 21st century view hypnosis, and how did you get into it?
Probably the easier question is how did I get into it? Very simple story. Um, I was doing a documentary, a very weird documentary about people who dreamt about 9/11 before it happened. So it turns out a lot of people had dreams of planes flying into buildings or that kind of thing before 9/11 happened. And they
Wow.
even told people, like they told their therapists or partners or something like that. So it was a very, very weird documentary. And part of the film involved debates about what happened, how people died. And
Okay.
so when we were working on the film, we arranged for footage. So when you're doing a documentary, you get footage sent to you. And in this case, it was footage of people dying during 9/11.
Oh my
And
God. Hmm.
I had to I had to watch it to figure out, okay, where does this go in the story? And is this correct? And often I would be doing it late at night. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm watching people die. And one image in particular was really burned into my brain. And it was an image I think that related to my own trauma about 9/11, in fact, as well. But there was like an image that really, like, I just couldn't get out of my head. And I noticed I would wake up thinking about it was like a particular guy asking for help before we know he's going to die. And so,
Oof. Hmm.
so the image just was stuck in my brain. And I noticed that when I thought about it, it gave me a feeling of the world being, I don't know how to say it, but basically the world was completely on edge. Like there was no safety that something like this was going to happen again very soon. And but also I noticed I wasn't sleeping well. I had higher levels of anxiety than I'd ever had. And it was
Hmm.
literally like this thing was stuck in my head. And so I literally see an ad. So this is about 25 years ago, I think.
Hmm.
I guess maybe not quite that, but I see an ad where somebody says, "Do you have pictures stuck in your mind that you can't get rid of on the internet?" And I'm like, "Call this number for free." And so I'm like, "Okay, I'll call this number." And so I call the number, and literally in half an hour, this problem that has plagued me for 6 months goes away completely. And and I asked the guy what we did, and he basically said it's hypnosis. And so I thought, oh, I got to learn how to do this because I have so many friends. Was that at that time working as a journalist who are traumatized, and I could help them. So first, I started learning sort of trauma protocols, and then I just started to do a deep dive. I started to realize. So one thing I found out was that this trauma protocol is itself a scandal because it's a
Oh,
very, very easy way to de-traumatize people, but the public doesn't know about it because the psychological model of treating people is if you have a trauma or a disturbance in your life,
yeah.
go to a therapist in about 2 or 3 years, maybe we'll get somewhere. While this style of hypnotic trauma relief can work incredibly fast. The theory is it can undo the problem at the speed at which it happened some of the time.
Hmm.
And so it's a very fast system. And part of this, like, it's a film I'd love to make, is that it's been deliberately suppressed.
Right.
So that was the first thing I realized. The second thing I realized is that there was no proper model that really explained how hypnosis worked.
Hmm.
So I started training to become a hypnotist. And then I started really, like, at one point, there's like these things in your life. I'm this way with eye vision restoration now, where I just like got really the bug. And I read
Yeah.
every book, studied every course I could, and got trained by some really good people. And and then that's when it dawned on me that there actually is a model that kind of explains it. And actually, weirdly, it relates to this other documentary that got me into the first place, because the documentary in the first place ultimately was kind of about dreaming.
Yeah.
And one of the theories is that, and I believe this to be true, that REM states in dreaming are very similar to hypnotic states.
Mm.
And that has huge implications. So I did a bunch of research on that, put it sort of together, And then, I'm not a scientist, but I just was able to go, look, there's a pretty good case here where if you make the link, amazing things happen. So there happened to be like a TEDx going on in my town, I think at the time, or whatever. And they invited people to audition. I auditioned, and what was funny was they had a jury. The jury, and of course, the jury happened to be very hypnotizable, so I hypnotized them all, and so it went really well. I explained to them what I was doing, like I explained what I was going to do, and then I did it. So they were like, "Whoa!" And then I explained, and then I remember thinking, when they said for sure, like literally, it was the only time I ever done an audition where they said, "You're in." They were like, "You're in right away."
So you do that TEDx talk. Sorry, when we're on that topic, and you have those people up on stage with you, right?
Yeah.
Were they actors?
No.
I'm sorry for asking it, because it just is so.
No, people often think they're actors, and I have two explanations for it. One is that when people are hypnotized, they are kind of in a waking dream where what the hypnosis tells them becomes their kind of reality to a certain extent. So if somebody's in deep enough, you tell them they're a chicken, they're a chicken. Do they look like they're acting? Sometimes they do, because the kind of people that are more likely to go up on stage are people that are not as afraid of acting out.
Okay.
The second thing, what I've noticed too, is that if you take a bunch of people and you hypnotize them and just start suggesting things to them, like you're all cowboys or whatever, they will seem a lot like improv actors. They just do. And in fact, there's a show which Colin Mockery did, where it actually got deep sixed just before the pandemic, where the idea was he would invite an audience that would get hypnotized, and then they would do improv.
Basically saying that inherently we all have it in us to do improv.
Exactly. And in hypnosis, people seem to look like improv actors. And so it's been a problem. Like, there's so many people who are like, I went through a pretty rough time with mostly Americans being convinced that these people are actors. But every time I do a hypnosis show, every show I've probably ever done, there's people who think they're actors. There is never actors. Never. In my case. I mean, there might be some people that use actors, but you don't need to. I'll tell you why. Basically, here's the math. 1 in 20% of people is highly hypnotizable. But 1 in 10 people is very highly hypnotizable. 2 out of 10 is pretty hypnotizable. If you have an audience of 100 people, you're going to get 10 people that are kind of magical. If you know how to put them into trance, you can suggest anything to them. And I'll tell you the profound reason why this is there. You might say, well, what? Like I often, it's actually the next TEDx I would like to do is where I would turn someone into a chicken and explain that actually, well, I did mention that this is actually a really profound phenomena.
Yeah.
And this is the explanation. One of the roles of dreaming is to teach us lessons. So for example, why do children always have nightmares? You would think it seems cruel that children have these horrifying nightmares, but basically it's their programming telling them to watch out for predators. You got to watch out for predators. And part of the idea would be, let's say you had a dream where you're being chased by wolves, and then in the dream you like climb a tree and you get away from the wolves. Then if it happens in real life that you encounter wolves, then you might climb a tree just like in your dream.
So it's like almost like it's playing out this kind of
simulation
reel in your head, and
That's
it's
right.
kind of feeding that information so you have it in your archives.
Right.
Crazy.
But now here's the interesting twist. Why does it need to be so convincing? So why does the wolf need to be so frightening in your dream? And the explanation is intriguing. If you didn't believe the wolf could kill you in the dream, you wouldn't figure out the right things to do. You wouldn't search for the way out. So similarly, when you hypnotize someone to be a chicken, what makes it funny is they really believe they are a chicken, because that's it's actually has a scientific term. It's called dream neutrality. It's the fact that we believe our dreams, not all the time, but part of the time. So when we believe our dreams, I saw this when I first started doing hypnosis. I would turn people into chickens. What was scary about it is sometimes I'd be in a crowded room and the chicken person would be right in front of me, and often it'd be like a guy.
Mm.
And I would realize, I would look at the energy of the guy moving, and I was like, this guy really is a chicken. He would
Mm.
move like a chicken. And because he believes 100% that he is. Now, what makes it confusing and why people think that there's actors sometimes is that only a certain percentage of the population can do this, like in a stage show,
Yeah.
where you can take them, put them in the trance, turn them into a chicken, and then they, you know, I'm using chicken as an example. You can turn them into
Yeah.
anything. You turn them
Yeah.
into an alien. And I guess, sorry, what's my point here? That if you come to a stage hypnosis show and you go, yeah, like that guy's a chicken, but it wouldn't work on me. And it might be true that it might not work on you. So
Mm.
this makes people very skeptical, and it
Right.
drives controversy. But you know, that TEDx has, I think, 11 million views, and I think
Yeah.
it's partly that controversy. The other
Yeah.
TEDx I did, which is called "Surprise You're Hypnotized," I think is more, well, it was a different story,
Mm.
but it's a more it's a whole other aspect of hypnotize. I try to be more direct with that one, but
Yeah. You know, I'd be so thrilled if you could come back and talk about this in more depth, because I think I want to explore the idea of trauma and hypnosis to heal people for trauma, and especially the expedited route, if there is one, versus like the scandal of it being a manipulative tool. And also, of course, about the new project and the new documentary you're working on, which is the natural eye healing. So I think we've covered a lot today, and I think
yeah,
we've taken a lot of time, and it's late for you, so I don't want to go on. But I
yeah.
really appreciate you sharing all your stories and doing such amazing work, because, as I said, I literally can get you back for each of your documentaries and go over it, because it's exciting, it's
Yeah, it's
fun,
true.
and
Yeah,
it's something that strikes a chord with me. So it's brilliant. Thank you.
thank you. Well, I think you asked excellent questions, and it was interesting to feel understood, and to the degree that I did. You know, yeah. I mean, uh, yeah, this has really been quite an interesting conversation. But you're right. I think hypnosis should be almost its own thing. I was
Yeah.
going to tell you, even to tease a really crazy story, is that there's a fellow, there's a famous 19th century British doctor who goes to
Hmm.
Mumbai, and he invents hypnosis for pain. And part of the story was, it's India again. It's how everything comes from India. At that time, there was a plague of, is it elephantitis? Is where men often had these huge swollen testicles. It's
Right.
an amazing story. His name was, I'm trying to remember his name. Let me just finish the story because it's amazing.
Yeah.
So part of the problem was you couldn't. This is before there was anesthetic.
Right.
So people had these massive tumors, and there was one fellow in Mumbai who had a tumor that he had to carry around in a whatchamacallit, wheelbarrow. It was so
Whoa.
big. It weighed
Jesus.
something like
I know it must
150
be agony,
pounds.
but it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's fun. It's painful. Yeah.
So this fellow, the hypnotist, figures out that he can hypnotize him and remove his tumor
Hmm.
while he's awake, and he does it.
Whoa.
And he becomes a legend in India at that time. Part of the
Hmm.
story is he goes back to London and nobody believes him. But
Right.
it would be a great film. It's such a great film, this guy, because it's like 19th century Calcutta, and um, when he first discovers mesmerism in
Yeah.
India. Quite intriguing.
No, it's amazing. I mean, that's a kind of thing, right? I mean, it's no one. Everyone talks about the British coming and taking the diamonds. No one talks about the
Yeah,
actual jewels that they took back.
yeah, exactly.
No, I think we need to dedicate an entire episode, and if you would,
Yeah, we should do a hypnosis one. And you could use, I mean, you can also use clips if you want. And I could even, if you like, I could even set up some of the things, like, for example, like the chicken thing. It's interesting to explain. Like, shock inductions are a whole other kettle of fish,
can
where
you do it over a call like this?
you can hypnotize people over Zoom very easily. You cannot, shock inductions generally don't work unless you literally could shock people, because you have to grab their hands.
Right,
But
right, right.
you can do, a lot of hypnotic inductions do work over Zoom. I do. I have a lot of clients over Zoom.
Oh, lovely.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll just talk about that after this. But I hopefully will have you back on this
Yeah.
podcast sooner than later. But thank you for sharing everything that you have today. I'll put the links to your documentaries in the description. And if anyone wants to reach you, they can send me an email and I'll put them in touch with you.
Yeah.
But Albert, really appreciate it. All the best for your new project and for all
Thank you.
your new endeavors. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. It was really a great time.
Thank you.